Welcome back to Left Right USA. Kat and Susan here. Today we're going to talk about the protests against ICE and how no, protesters against ICE aren't crazy.
Right. With receipts.
With receipts. So Susan's done a lot of research in the tactics, what DHS is doing, and everything we're going to talk about today.
And why people are concerned.
So yeah, let's get started.
Yes. So yeah, the tactics that the federal immigration agents have been provoking, it's been everywhere. It's not just in Minnesota.
Right.
We know immigration agents have an important job to do. They really do. However, there are thorough, documented accounts of aggressive, skirting the law, and clearly unlawful behavior by federal immigration agents in cities throughout our country in the last year.
Yeah, and it just came out recently that there's a secret DHS memo that they issued in May asserting that agents no longer need a warrant signed by a judge, a judicial warrant, to enter a private home.
Yeah, that's really serious. That's against the Fourth Amendment and an established law based on the Fourth Amendment. And the agency's own training materials and the information posted about interior deportations on the government's own page, if you're interested in looking at that.
Right. And the new hire ICE agents have reportedly been trained to follow the memo's procedures instead of legally approved training materials.
Yeah, so that's one thing. There's also been a repeated pattern of lying about what agents are doing and about what protesters are doing. So many lies have been disproven in court. For instance, that lady that got shot 5 times in Chicago, they said that she rammed them with her car and that she had pulled a gun. She did not. Video evidence proved in court that was not the case, that actually DHS agents had rammed her and her gun never left its holster and was just in her vehicle. So, and then Greg Bovino, the border chief patrol, also had to go to court in Chicago. And he was caught lying about what had happened with protesters. So it's just, there's a pattern of it, of lies. And so it makes it so we really can't rely on what DHS is saying.
They consistently lie more than tell the truth. There's a pattern of them charging protesters with crimes, assault, obstruction, and then dropping those charges, but they hold them in detention.
Exactly. And
for days, weeks, well, sometimes hours.
Even hours. Like, well, who wants to be held for 8 hours and then you just let go with no charges, or they get charges and then when it comes close to court time, the charges are dropped. So the AP, Associated Press, did a segment about that pattern among other media outlets. So it's a pattern. That's what they're doing. They're lying.
Yeah, and when you talk about citizens being detained, even a disruption of 2 hours in my life would be huge.
Well, plus you're getting hurt.
Getting hurt, getting beat up,
smashing your car windows.
Well, I mean, did you hear about the I read just within the last couple of weeks that there was a man taken into an ER with multiple skull fractures. And there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 agents that brought him in handcuffed and said he ran himself into a wall.
Well, and
that was found to be completely impossible.
The story
kept changing
because at first one of the agents told the medical professionals at the first hospital that he intimated that they had done it to him. And then later in the second hospital is when they started saying the guy had run into a wall trying to get away.
And they cuffed him to the hospital bed.
Exactly.
And he went into the hospital.
He was an illegal immigrant, but still.
But you don't
fracture
the procedures.
someone's skull in
just
places.
Just because they're an illegal immigrant doesn't mean they can be beaten.
To
almost death. That man deteriorated very quickly.
Exactly.
And so,
but as far as citizens, there's been hundreds of U.S. citizens that have been picked up and detained. Sometimes when they get released, the DHS keeps their phones or their jewelry, or they're injured. So and a lot of times
one person followed his GPS or followed his tracking to his phone, and his phone was in a used vending machine. Yeah, a used vending machine.
So some agent
that was very close to the detention center
and sold it.
Right.
Yeah, and but a lot of times these citizens have been recorded on video when they're detained, and they're not even. Sometimes they're not even protesting at all.
Yeah, it's not related to even protest.
They're just driving by.
I mean, that doesn't even matter. That doesn't even
or
matter whether or not
walking
they're protesting.
No, it shouldn't.
I don't think
at all.
Preddy was even protesting. He was just filming on the side. They were in front of some donut shop. There wasn't an active protest happening.
Right. Well, there were people gathering because of a detention that was being taken place. But So, but yeah, it shouldn't matter. But yeah, even people who aren't even protesting at all are being caught up. So and there's documented reports of these detentions. So yeah, that's happening.
So and then these escalated aggression of the DHS tactics, it preceded the protest. The protests are a reaction and the result to the aggressive tactics, not the other way around.
Right, because I've heard people saying, oh, it's just all these interactions are because of the protesters, but no, the aggressive tactics came first. Even shortly after the inauguration of President Trump on January 23rd, he sent in coordinated enforcement raids to 9 cities.
Atlanta, Boston, Denver, Miami, New York City, Newark, Philadelphia, Seattle, and DC.
Right. So it started from the very beginning, from the car wash raids in Los Angeles to sending illegal immigrants to Sikot prison in El Salvador without criminal convictions, to repealing the protected areas policies, to targeting and wounding journalists with non-lethal rounds, to agents rappelling from helicopters in Chicago. Those newly aggressive policies have been alarming and angering Americans all over the country.
And so this has escalated into the Minneapolis, Minnesota region, where this aggressive and sometimes illegal behavior by federal immigration agents has escalated in that city, where the federal government has sent some 3,000 to 4,000 immigration. Is it 3,000 immigration agents into a city that I think only has 600 police officers.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, you think about it, it's like, realistically, why send 3,000 agents? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
So when you look at a lot of the other things that are being put into place, it makes sense for the 2026 elections.
Yes.
And it's just recently been admitted by a close advisor to Trump that they plan on stationing immigration agents at polling stations.
Oh, that was Steve Bannon. He's a former advisor, but I know. He seems to know.
Seems to still know things, so I still think he has Trump's ear. So
yeah, exactly. But it's not just people protesting that are reacting. It's people are sitting down and documenting with video. They're documenting with witness reports, etc. We've included a long and detailed list of some of what's been happening in Minneapolis that was written by a pastor who lives there in South Minneapolis. And police chiefs in the Minneapolis area are also stating that people's rights are being violated. And several of them had a press conference where they described it and even mentioned that it's happening to their off-duty police officers.
Right.
And now, of course, federal agents have shot and killed 2 citizens in Minneapolis.
So really, the administration officials have lied about the killings and obstructed investigations.
Yeah.
Not only have those 2 citizens been killed, but the administration lied about what happened. And we talked about that in our last video. It's been obstructing investigation into the shootings. There's forensic evidence that is there to be collected on the state level, but the federal government is not cooperating at all.
Right. In the aftermath of that first shooting, state and federal officials were cooperating at the beginning as usual.
That's
but then the
typical
federal government suddenly withdrew their cooperation and would not let state officials access evidence. And then after the second shooting, the Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension was called to the scene and then was prevented from accessing the crime scene by federal agents, even when the BCA went and secured a warrant from a judge. So the BCA was also not allowed to access the evidence collected from this shooting scene. And at first, the federal government refused to do any criminal investigation into either shooting.
Yeah.
But they've now grudgingly agreed to do a civil rights investigation into the shooting of Alex Preddy, but they still haven't agreed to do any investigation into the shooting of Renee Good, which would normally be standard procedure.
Well, yeah, and I believe 6 people within the FBI who have jurisdiction specifically over officer-involved shootings on the federal level, 6 of them quit.
That was in the Minnesota office.
Yeah.
6 of them quit from the Minnesota office over them not being willing to investigate the shooting and starting to investigate Renee's wife instead.
Right.
And then 8 more have since quit.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Over the fallout over Alex Preddy and what's been going on since then. So all of those FBI investigators see that things are not being run as they should be.
Right.
And they have resigned in protest.
Yep.
That tells you something right there.
Yeah. And then each week I tend to get involved on occasion with online discussion groups and whatnot within politics. And I just see so much about the misinformation regarding sanctuary policies and sanctuary cities.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions about that. And I think that it's been purposefully misrepresented for years.
Yeah.
So the first thing to know is that sanctuary policies are legal and they vary widely from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But no jurisdiction in the United States refuses to honor criminal warrants. Whether they have a sanctuary policy or not, they all honor criminal warrants. And it's based on the anti-commandeering doctrine, which is rooted in the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which means that states and localities cannot be compelled to enforce federal law with their own personnel and resources. And many court rulings have upheld this doctrine.
Right. Because there are so many cases and so many locales, local jurisdictions where their police forces, they don't have the resources to offer the federal government.
Or they don't want to use their taxpayer dollars to have to pay for federal operations.
Right, because they're busy on their own local cases.
Yeah.
And it pulls away from working crime cases within the local jurisdiction. It pulls away from that.
Right, which is one reason that some jurisdictions do decide to enact sanctuary policies. It's not necessarily because they're like, oh, immigrants, but because they don't want to use those resources. But by law, immigration enforcement can only be performed by the federal government. States cannot conduct immigration enforcement.
By law.
Now, a jurisdiction may assist federal agents with immigration enforcement if it decides to do so. And the highest level of assistance that they can do is a 287G agreement. And under that agreement, local law enforcement officers are sworn in as federal deputies to conduct immigration enforcement. And so, just to be clear, sanctuary policies do not create a place where a federal immigration agent can't come in and detain an illegal immigrant. They can always come in and detain immigrants. Sanctuary policies only refer to rules that a jurisdiction can set on how much its own law enforcement will cooperate with federal immigration agents. Some allow almost no cooperation, others allow extensive cooperation, most fall somewhere in the middle. So it's not black and white, and federal agents can still come in and do whatever they need to do in any jurisdiction.
Right. I mean, and it's not a matter of whether or not they're willing to. It's a matter of how that jurisdiction decides they need their resources spent.
Right.
And not budget-wise, but like the time spent, the energy spent on local cases, crime cases.
Right. And some of them prioritize, they want anyone who's living in the area to not be afraid to call the police.
Right.
They prioritize local safety over immigration enforcement because they don't want crimes to be able to be committed without them being able to address them. Because if someone's afraid to call the police, then that's crimes that won't get addressed.
Right.
So that's one reason that some jurisdictions do use sanctuary policies. And some are afraid of potential legal repercussions because you can get sued if you hold someone past the time that you're legally supposed to release them.
Right.
So that's another reason. It's interesting. Minnesota has been a good example of a place that has mixed sanctuary policies, because people look at it, what's reported, and think, oh, well, Minnesota's a sanctuary state. No, it's not that simple. So all Minnesota state prisons notify DHS when an illegal incarcerated individual is about to be released, and they honor immigration detainer requests under which an individual can be held for up to 48 hours until, an immigration agent can come pick them up. So many of the individuals DHS has claimed in recent detention totals were handed over to ICE directly by Minnesota state prison officials. Now, city and county jails, though, are a patchwork as far as sanctuary policies go. Some have them, some don't.
Right.
So
then, you got to look at this overlap of some of the detentions of immigrants that are legally here.
Right. Exactly. While they may not be citizens and they may not have a visa, they have a legal status. So,
which could be anything from a pending asylum claim.
Exactly.
Once they claim asylum and they're waiting for their asylum interview, they're legal. They're here legally.
They have legal status to be here. Now, that can be rescinded at any time, but is it the best policy that the first notice an immigrant has that the government intends to rescind their status as being snatched off the street?
Right. I mean, you hear about people complaining, and you see people complaining that if they just do it the right way, the legal way, there won't be a problem. Well, there's a problem, because it's not being, people who are doing it the legal and right way, many are still being detained.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't understand that there's nuances to all the different statuses that people can have. They can be here without a visa and still have a legal presence.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't understand that. So if someone has a legal status and they're just snatched off the street, that gives the immigrant and their family no time to prepare, financially, emotionally, or any ways for their deportation. And it's really hard on their employers, because most of these people have a work permit and they're working. And so their employers just suddenly don't have their employees, and often the immigrant who's been detained suddenly like that files a habeas petition and gets released again anyway, pending an appearance with a judge. So why are we cycling people through?
It's a waste of it's a waste of the budget that's funded for
so much money and so many man hours, and it doesn't work. Why don't we use some of the billions of dollars that DHS got from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act to hire hundreds of new immigration judges and support staff and get through that huge backlog of cases in an efficient way? Why these sudden detentions, which often end up with them back out on the street having to be adjudicated anyway?
Right, which costs money.
It doesn't make any sense if you're just really, if your aim is really to just deport people. That is not the most efficient way to do it. Which makes you think it's not just
about immigration.
No,
there's so much out there where it just reinforces that specific stance that it's not just about immigration. And you look at citizen surveillance by DHS.
That's another big one. Exactly. Troubling reports of immigration officials taking photos of observers and their license plate information
and protesters,
telling them that they are adding you to a database of domestic terrorists. There's been at least 7 incidences where citizens were told that by federal officers that you're being added to a database of domestic terrorists. I'm like,
so exercising, so according to DHS, from what I understand, exercising your First Amendment rights or exercising your constitutional rights in any given moment is putting you or classifying you as a domestic terrorist.
Which it shouldn't.
No, I mean, that's not something
a free society does.
Free country. That is some Nazi level stuff. I mean,
exactly. It's like you shouldn't have to stay home, keep your kids off the street,
and avoid public.
Yeah, exactly. Don't film.
And Frank, can we say,
Exactly. That shouldn't be the way things are in our free country.
No.
Yeah, exactly. And in none of the 7 incidences that I've heard of where they were told they were being added to a domestic terrorist database, were they doing anything that would have been considered obstructing or anything. So,
well, I mean, just even if you were obstructing, that's still misdemeanor level. That is not like domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
That is not terrorism. And you got to look up the definition.
Yeah, exactly.
The legal definition of domestic terrorism. There's a legal, there's like a threshold of activity
it might be
that would qualify
annoying,
under that.
But it's not terrorism.
No,
yeah,
right.
That's serious.
I mean, whistles, honk, horny, horn honking, honk,
exactly.
horn honking, swearing,
yelling.
all of that is freedom of speech. All of that. I mean, it is not up to a U.S. citizen to de-escalate. It is up to the professional LEO, law enforcement officer, to de-escalate.
Yeah, and freedom is messy.
Yeah.
It looks messy. But that's the way it should be. We don't want order above all. We want freedom. And that's important.
Yeah. So DHS has bought access to a tool called WebLock, developed by Penlink, that enables the real-time and continuous tracking of mobile devices in a neighborhood using commercial location data collected on hundreds of millions of phones.
I'm starting to have a problem with that. And they've also been using a new app called Mobile Fortify, which uses facial recognition technology to judge someone's citizenship status, often regardless of whether you have documentation to the contrary.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It also says that no one can opt out of being scanned by that app, and the agency is storing the photos for 15 years. So
ICE has also expanded its social media surveillance capabilities with its purchase of multiple tools that allow it to build online dossiers of anyone with a public social media presence, continuously tracking individuals' online activity across platforms, including marketplaces and search engines. So us doing our videos, we're in trouble. Oh my.
Yeah, well, we might be, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yep, we're going to do it anyway. We have rights. We have legal precedent. So
yeah, but it's quite the intrusion. And then Wired Magazine had viewed internal documents that indicate that ICE has plans to build out a 24/7 social media surveillance team. They're starting to put out feelers to hire people for that role. 404 Media is reporting that law enforcement officers, local law enforcement officers, not federal ones, are routinely conducting searches on that nationwide Flock license plate camera system on behalf of ICE agents. So even though they're not supposed to have access, they're getting it through some local law enforcement. And in 2025, DHS even flew Predator drones over protests in Los Angeles. So it's just a big increase in citizen surveillance. This is not just about catching illegal immigrants. It's about surveilling citizens.
Right.
In a big way.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about absolute immunity for federal agents?
Yeah, that was a very troubling statement by the vice president.
I know.
He's since walked it back a little bit, but that he said it at all is very disturbing. He was saying that federal agents have absolute immunity for actions that they take in the course of their duties, but they do not. That is not true. If they break the law, even in the course of their duties, they may be prosecuted.
Yeah, yeah. Which they still have qualified immunity.
Yes, exactly. So I was reading up on that a little bit. A state court report article was explaining the law is clear. There's no absolute immunity for federal officers from state law. It cites precedent for cases in which federal officers were allowed to proceed, some very similar to the shootings in Minnesota.
Right.
So
then you look at the masks and no ID.
Yeah, exactly.
For ICE agents.
And that's a pretty ubiquitous practice now. There's only a few agents that I've seen that are going without masks, and none of them seem to have ID or identification at all.
It sets a fearful precedent.
It really does. And combined with the citizen surveillance and also the statement that federal agents have absolute immunity, that's
they're
pretty
anonymous.
Scary. When you think about it, police, judges, prosecutors, the National Guard, they all deal with the public, with dangerous people in highly charged situations, and they do it without masks while fully identified why. So there can be accountability to us, to the public. If an official breaks the law during the course of conducting their duties, we need to be able to hold them accountable. And immigration agents should be no different than these other people. They're brave. Why can't we have our immigration agents do the same thing? And I've heard people argue, well, there's institutional review processes that'll take care of it. If one of
they're
these
being doxxed,
agents,
they're endangered.
If one of these agents breaks the law, their institution will take care of it with their review process. But how many cases do we all know of where an in-house review process was not enough to ensure accountability for wrong actions? I mean, we're concerned about fraud, waste, and abuse within the government. Why are we setting up a situation where this whole branch of the government will have no outside accountability? That doesn't seem smart. It seems like a prelude to something very scary, a dangerous path, a standing secret police.
Well, I mean, even the Gestapo didn't wear masks.
Right. So they at least knew who they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But we need our agents to be loyal to the people and to the Constitution.
There are states passing legislation that is requiring that ICE not wear masks and have identification. And, you see these statements, of people who are against that, well, ICE is getting doxxed, like I was just mentioning a moment ago. And it's like, oh, well, states don't have precedent over federal law. But the thing is, there's no federal law that requires them to wear masks. So it's not in opposition or, it doesn't counter any federal law.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, there's no basis and there's no support for that statement
in the Constitution that all powers that are not specifically given to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. And so if there is not any federal law, legislation that requires them to wear masks, then yes, the states do have the power to be able to require them not to go masked.
Yeah. So, when you look at a secret police state like this, only loyal to the current administration, not to the people or the Constitution, it really does underpin our legal structure.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want that.
No,
I don't want that in our country.
So circling it back around to the myth that immigrants are dangerous criminals, because it's seriously, there's so many
that's how
factual and so much evidence that points away from the fact that this isn't just about immigration.
That's how people are trying to justify all of these troubling actions that are being taken by immigration agents, that we have to take extreme actions to protect ourselves against these illegal alien criminals. But let's look at that. I mean, of course it's important to detain and deport criminals, and there's widespread support for removing criminals.
On both the left, right, and middle.
Yes, everyone's like, fine, take the criminals. We don't care.
I don't want criminals.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been accused of.
Let's make sure they are criminals.
Are you going to protect the illegal criminals that are killing and raping all the women?
Of course
and
not.
It's like,
that's just a logical
fallacy. That what you really believe? You really think that?
Nobody wants to protect the criminals. No. Let's make sure they are criminals. Like, don't ship off innocent people
to
prison. But if they are, let's get them out. Fine. But do the new tactics actually help us accomplish removing more criminals than our old tactics? And we've talked about this in a previous video.
Right. The old tactics have been a lot more effective and legal. They remain within the legal bounds.
Less dangerous.
Less dangerous. Citizens aren't getting caught up. And
if we look at our DHS's own numbers, we see that over 70% of those detained have no criminal history, and only 5% of those removed last year had charges or convictions of violent crime, whereas in 2024, 10 to 11% removed had committed violent crime. So it's half the percentage of those who actually committed violent crime that are getting taken now with these new tactics. Yeah. And then we have to talk about what you said, with immigrants themselves are 60% less likely to commit a crime than the general U.S. citizen population.
And I think that's probably because of the fear of deportation.
Sure, that could be one of the reasons. And statistically speaking, more immigrants in your neighborhood would mean it would be safer. Immigrants have even been proven to commit a little less fraud than U.S. citizens
overall,
despite the recent highlighting of the ongoing fraud cases in Minnesota that have been being prosecuted since 2022. It's not like nothing's been being done. New. It's just
a lot of people believe it's new because Trump started highlighting it and talking about it.
Mm-hmm. But no, it's been being worked on
in the last month or so
since like 2022. And this. So, for instance, I was looking at data from the U.S. Sentencing Commission.
Mm-hmm.
As far as benefits fraud goes, non-citizens were 8% less likely to be convicted of benefits fraud. Since 2015, the number of non-citizens convicted of benefits fraud has been decreasing, while the number of U.S. citizens committing benefits fraud has been increasing. So it's going the other way. And 21% of non-citizen fraud cases resulted in no loss to the government, as opposed to only 1% of citizen benefits fraud cases. So they embezzled more money, the citizens did.
Right. And even on, you're looking at the local Minnesota fraud cases, there has been identified someone that was the head of that, which was I believe they identified it as a U.S. citizen female.
Yep. It was.
That was like the ringmaster.
Yeah,
of that
she
fraud.
was the ringleader. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we can still decide to deport illegal immigrants if we want to, but let's not be fooled by the massive propaganda campaign that tries to persuade us that deportations are primarily for our safety. They are not, according to the facts. You could just as easily put up photo after photo of citizens killed by other citizens. So why not try to stir up more awareness and outrage about citizen-on-citizen violence, since it's actually more common?
Right, because I've seen the infographics of all these little photos killed by. It's a handful of people compared to the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people killed by U.S. citizens
and it's
each
all
year.
Bad, but the reason people don't focus on the citizen-on-citizen violence is because it doesn't serve a currently useful political purpose.
Right.
So let's just not be fooled by the propaganda and say, okay, this is not why we're actually deporting illegal immigrants, and we can still do it if we want to, but let's not be fooled that it's actually for safety reasons.
Right, and this out of control crime issue by immigrants is just not upheld by the facts.
Yeah, and crime in general has also been used as a talking point this last year to try to justify extreme tactics by immigration officers and for the occupation of our cities by the military. Like, oh, well, crime, it's out of control. We gotta make everyone safe.
Yeah.
And so the propaganda has spread that fear that we have out of control crime in our country. But that's not upheld by facts.
Right.
So you actually look at the facts.
Crime has been declining since, the 1990s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It was the highest in like the late 80s, early 90s. And then there was a little spike in violent crime around the COVID epidemic. But rates of all crime, except cybercrime, have been going down ever since. So the contention that we have a crime crisis in our country, even in Democrat-led cities, is just not factually true.
And not supported by any of the statistics.
No. So we're looking at FBI data. National violent crime has fallen by almost 50% from its peak in the early 90s. That includes murder, manslaughter, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. Homicide and aggravated assault had a little bump around the time of COVID pandemic, but it's dropped since. Homicide has dropped by about 27% since COVID. Aggravated assault has dropped by about 14.5%. So Americans in the 1990s were at least twice as likely to be victims of crime as they are today. And actually, interestingly, it's also true at a global level. When you look at murder rates, that's also gone down globally. So that is not necessarily how people perceive it in the public, though, because you see instances of violent, assaults and stuff, and it's amplified in the media, right? So in 23 out of 27 annual Gallup surveys, the majority said they believed crime rates had increased from the previous year, which is just not statistically true, but it's what you perceive.
It's the perception, right?
Yeah. The reality of crime rates and what you perceive is there's a disconnect between the two. It's impossible to get a sense of the broader changes in crime from individual stories alone. You've got to step back and look at consistent data over time. So just I want to say that not because I want to justify illegal immigrants. I want to say that because I don't want people to be afraid of things that aren't true.
Right.
I want us to know the truth, you know?
Right.
So just be educated on that, and don't be so afraid, you know? Why live in fear and outrage all the time?
Yeah.
You know, it's a tactic that's trying to sway you to accept something that shouldn't be accepted in the United States of America.
Right.
Yeah.
So immigration agents, both current and former, are speaking out against the aggressive new tactics.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. There's agents, they have some online platforms that are for federal immigration agents, and they're complaining on the platform about how operations are being managed. They're complaining about how the tactics being used are stupid. They're saying, my bosses are lying on their 213 narrative statements. Detainments are being double counted by the multiple agencies involved. You know, they're spilling the beans on their online platforms, and some reporters are queuing into that. So it's kind of interesting. Even the people doing it are complaining. We just had Janet Napolitano. She's a former DHS secretary who spoke out at that recent hearing on Capitol Hill.
Right.
New York Times reporters interviewed a number of current and former federal immigration agents after the shooting deaths in Minneapolis.
Gil Kurlikowski,
yeah,
former leader of Customs and Border Protection, said many of the tactics he had seen being used in Minneapolis and other cities, like shooting people with pepper ball rounds and spraying chemical agents at nonviolent protesters, were far outside standard practices in law enforcement.
He said, morale is in the dumpster. Many of the agents will be very happy to go back to the job they were trained for on the border. I thought that was interesting perspective from someone who knows the work, right?
Yeah, one current Homeland Security agent said he had always given the benefit of the doubt to the government in these situations, but he no longer believed any of the statements they put out anymore.
As he shouldn't.
Right.
Yeah.
We lost all trust, one current ICE official said. I'm not sure I can see how we exist 3 years from now.
Yeah. And then Tom Quinn, a former senior official at CBP, he left agency last year. He criticized the White House's reckless push for deportation numbers, saying that it was putting the public and law enforcement at great risk. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Hagelzeeb, he's a former resident agent in charge at HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. That's the investigative arm of ICE. Said one particular worry of his is the number of ICE special agents that are taken off of complex criminal investigations to instead track down undocumented immigrants, many of whom not been convicted of any crime. And he said it's like a local police department pulling a homicide investigator to conduct an operation against jaywalkers. Yeah, and then we're seeing that in a lot of cases.
Yeah, they're causing a lot of chaos. Just a lot of chaos.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what he said. They're causing chaos. And unfortunately, it's costing lives.
And there's only so much they can handle before bad things start to happen.
And that's what we're seeing. Yeah. So even the people involved are saying this is not the way things should be done.
Yeah. So in conclusion, we should support the lawful detention and deportation of immigrants who do not have legal status.
Yeah. And I think most of us agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we should not support unlawful and dangerous actions by federal immigration agents.
Yeah, the new tactics being used by DHS and federal immigration agents are far outside of normal.
They're counterproductive. They're inflammatory. They're not very effective. They are dangerous, and they are eroding civil rights.
We should immediately restore the old tactics that immigration agents used to use. We should hire hundreds of new immigration judges and support staff to work through the backlog of cases.
And we should push for comprehensive reform of our often patchwork and ill-formed immigration and asylum systems. We should not accept what is going on right now.
So what do you think about the dangerous new immigration tactics? Drop a comment below.
Hit like and subscribe to help us get the word out.
Is there a topic that you'd like us to cover? Contact us and let us know.
And check out our Substack to get detailed write-ups and find our Facebook and Blue Sky to help keep up to date with the latest news we post frequently throughout the day. And welcome to the conversation.